I have an update for you on a story that I teased this way about, really captivating the nation for so many reasons to have, we're being led to the trough, the possible suspect, there's possible new information, but Pima County not jumping in. Nobody providing us with a lot of information on this, Nancy, other than what we're putting together by saying, hey, this can't be real, the data does not lie. That is the line an FBI analyst reportedly said the moment Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker records were finally decoded. And right after that, the room supposedly went dead silent. Why? Because what appeared on that screen did not fit the official version of events at all. According to insider reports, on the night everyone believed Nancy was either asleep or already gone, her heart activity suddenly surged. Fast, erratic, out of control, not like someone resting, like someone in distress, like someone fighting. Then another pattern appeared, a movement sequence, a timing issue, something that did not line up with where Nancy was officially believed to be when she vanished. And that points to one brutal possibility. Either the timeline is wrong, or someone has been hiding the truth. And here is where it gets even darker. Some sources are now saying she may not have been alone. Think about that for a second. If that is true, then who was with her? And the even bigger question is why no one said a word about this until now. This is not just another case update. This could be the piece of evidence that blows the whole case apart. And what we are about to get into may change everything. Before the pacemaker data, before the FBI began looking at the case through this new lens, the investigation was already drowning in confusion, pressure, and unanswered questions. Because from the very beginning, nothing about Nancy Guthrie's disappearance felt normal. Nancy was not the kind of person who simply drifted off the map. She lived by routine, a strict one. Same habits, same schedule, same patterns every single day. People who knew her described her as predictable, almost down to the minute. She did not skip her morning walk. She checked in. She did not just vanish. That is what people kept saying, which is exactly why the moment she was reported missing, something felt wrong. There was no obvious forced entry, no clean sign of a struggle, no clear trail pointing investigators in any one direction, just silence. And that silence created more questions than answers. Because how does someone disappear without leaving behind the kind of evidence people expect? At first, investigators tried to build a timeline that felt neat, a simple sequence. Nancy was last seen at home. Everything looked normal. Then she was gone. Clean, contained, easy to say out loud, but according to sources, what was happening behind the scenes was anything but simple. Because even the earliest reports carried inconsistencies. Small ones at first, but those are often the most dangerous kind. They do not disappear, they grow. One insider allegedly said, "The timing never felt right." Another reportedly claimed there was a missing piece, but no one yet knew what it was. And then there was Savannah, trying to look steady in public, keeping herself composed on camera, while behind the scenes, things were reportedly far more fragile. Because this was never just another missing person case to her. It was personal, emotional, and according to some accounts, more complicated than the public understood. There were moments when Savannah looked calm and collected, but there were other moments when her reactions did not seem to align with the timeline investigators were working from. And people noticed that, social media noticed that, the comments came fast. Why does this feel off? Why does none of this quite add up? Are we missing something bigger? At first, those reactions were brushed aside as noise, speculation, internet overreach. But then the investigation started running into walls. No solid suspect, no clear direction, just scattered pieces that refused to connect. And the longer that went on, the more pressure started building, not just from the public, but from inside the investigation itself. Because when a case stalls, people stop music accepting the obvious. They go deeper, they start questioning even the things that were treated like settled facts. And that is when the focus began to shift. Because investigators reportedly started asking a different kind of question. Maybe the answer was not in what they could see. Maybe it was in something they had overlooked. Not the doors, not the windows, not the obvious physical evidence, something smaller, something silent, something that had been there the whole time, recording without anyone realizing what it might hold. And that is when attention turned to something no one had expected to matter this much. Nancy's pacemaker. At first, it did not seem like a major lead, just a medical device, a piece of equipment helping regulate her heart, nothing more. But then someone asked a simple question. What if it recorded something? That question changed everything. Because once the FBI got involved and once they began extracting and reading that data, what they found did not simply add one more detail to the case. It challenged the timeline at its core. And suddenly, this was not just a disappearance anymore. It became something larger, something darker. Because if that device is telling the truth, then someone out there knows exactly what happened that night, and they may have been hiding it from the start. And trust me, what comes next is where this story turns in a direction almost no one saw coming. Everything shifted the moment that data was finally interpreted. Until then, investigators had been working with a timeline that looked controlled, contained, almost too clean. Nancy was believed to be inside her home during a narrow window of time, and then after that, she was simply gone. But the second FBI analyst started reviewing her pacemaker logs. That version began falling apart piece by piece. According to insider leaks, the records did not show calm, ordinary heart activity. They showed sudden spikes, violent ones, unexplained ones. One analyst reportedly stopped the review and said, "Wait, this does not match the report." Because at a time when Nancy was supposed to be resting, maybe even asleep, her heart activity shot upward. Fast, irregular, like something triggered it, not a small rise, not the kind of fluctuation you shrug off, the kind of spike consistent with extreme stress, fear, or physical struggle. And it did not happen just once. It happened more than once. Back-to-back patterns that made no sense under the timeline investigators had been using. And here is where it gets worse. Those spikes did not look random. They looked timed, structured, like they were marking moments that were never reflected in the official sequence of events. Which means one thing. Nancy was active at a time when everyone believed she was not. Let that sit there for a second. Because if she was active, then the story told from the start is incomplete, or worse, wrong. And this is where the first real twist hits. Because when investigators tried to line up the pacemaker data against the established timeline, they reportedly found something deeply troubling. A gap, a missing window, minutes, maybe more, during which Nancy's biological activity suggests motion, interaction, even resistance. And yet there is no corresponding explanation in the case file. No witness, no documented event, nothing. It is almost as if those minutes were erased from the narrative, or never properly acknowledged in the first place. That is when suspicions reportedly started to shift, because now the question was no longer just what happened. It became who knew about this and said nothing. Sources claim this discovery caused serious internal tension, because some investigators began revisiting assumptions that had been accepted early, decisions that may have been made too quickly, and statements that were never fully challenged. Then came the part no one expected, the location mismatch. According to reports, the pacemaker data suggested Nancy's stress spikes did not align perfectly with where she was believed to be inside the house, meaning she may have moved or been moved during a stretch of time no one had properly accounted for. And if that is true, then someone either missed it or ignored it, and that is a dangerous place for any investigation to be, because once doubt gets inside the timeline, everything starts to wobble. Every statement, every detail, every person connected to that night. And this is where the case begins to feel personal in a different way. Because whispers started circulating about inconsistencies in those early accounts. Who saw what? Who said what? And maybe even more importantly, who did not say anything at all? One insider allegedly framed it this way. It is not only about what the data shows, it is about what the data exposes. Because if Nancy's body was reacting in a way that suggests fear, struggle, or the presence of another person, then one question becomes impossible to avoid. She was not alone, and if she was not alone, then someone was there with her that night. Close enough to trigger those reactions, close enough to leave something behind. But here is the twist that pushes this to another level. Just as investigators were trying to process what the pacemaker data might mean, another detail reportedly surfaced, a detail that had been overlooked before, something small, but now impossible to ignore. Because according to one source, there may have been a second set of unexplained activity tied to that same time window, not just Nancy's biological data, but something else. Something that suggests this was not one isolated event. It was an interaction. And if that is true, then we are no longer looking at a simple disappearance. We are looking at a confrontation, a moment that escalated, a moment that changed everything. Music. And the worst part is we still do not know who was on the other side of it. But what we do know is this. The pacemaker did not just record a heartbeat, it recorded a moment someone may have hoped would never be seen, and now that it has been seen, there is no way to put it back. Because what comes next is where this case stops being merely confusing and starts becoming dangerous. And just when investigators thought this pacemaker data could not get more unsettling, it did. Because the second any part of this information started leaking, even quietly, everything detonated. Not in a formal briefing, not in some dramatic press conference. Online, quietly at first, then all at once, threads started appearing. Anonymous accounts, self-described insiders, people claiming they had seen parts of the report. And they were all pointing to the same idea. The timeline was not just off, it had been shaped. One viral post claimed that if the pacemaker data was real, then someone had been adjusting the narrative from day one. Another went even further and called it a cover. And suddenly the conversation changed. This was no longer just about finding Nancy. Now it was about trust. Because if key moments were missing from the timeline, who removed them and why? Then came the second twist, the one that changed the temperature of the entire conversation again. According to a source close to the investigation, there was one specific spike in Nancy's pacemaker data that did not just suggest stress. It showed a pattern consistent with close proximity, as if someone was near her for longer than anyone had originally believed. Not a quick encounter, not a sudden grab, a sustained presence, an interaction. And here is where it becomes even more controversial. That same time window allegedly overlaps with a period in which certain individuals were already said to be accounted for, meaning, according to official statements, they were not supposed to be near Nancy at all during that stretch. But the data appears to tell a different story. Music. And once that detail began circulating, social media lost all restraint. People started digging through old interviews, replaying clips, analyzing body language, and pointing out inconsistencies that had been ignored before. Why the hesitation there? Why did that explanation sound rushed? Why did no one question this earlier? And just like that, suspicion started shifting away from some unknown outsider and toward the people closest to the case. Because now every statement, every alibi, every version of the timeline was under a microscope. And investigators reportedly started doing what stalled cases sometimes force them to do. They went backward. They reopened early assumptions. They revisited old reports. They re-examined evidence that had already been processed. Because once serious doubt enters the structure of a case, you do not just keep moving forward, you go back and look again. And when they did, that is when something else reportedly stood out, something that had been there the whole time but had never been connected to the pacemaker data until now. A detail so small it had nearly been dismissed. But once placed beside the device records, it did not just fit. It suggested a possibility investigators were not ready to confront, because if that connection is real, then this was not random, it was not rushed, it was deliberate. And someone knew exactly what they were doing. The only problem is we still do not know who. But what comes next is where this stops sounding like theory and starts turning into full-blown chaos. This is the point where everything spun out, because once those details started spreading, the internet did not just react, it exploded. Within hours, the case shifted from quiet speculation to open online warfare. One side insisted this changed everything, that the FBI had clearly found something enormous and was not ready to reveal it publicly. The other side fired back just as hard, arguing that people were twisting technical data into a narrative that did not actually exist. There was no middle ground, no calm analysis, just chaos. Hashtags started trending. Pacemaker truth. Justice for Nancy. Hidden timeline. People chose sides fast. Some believed this was the breakthrough everyone had been waiting for. Others believed it was dangerous misinformation spiraling out of control. Then the content creators arrived. True crime commentators, reaction channels, self-styled insiders. Everyone wanted in. One viral creator said that if the data was accurate, then someone close to the case had been lying from the beginning. Another pushed back hard, warning that a spike in medical data does not automatically equal guilt. And just like that, the divide got even deeper. Even traditional media began hinting at the controversy, not stating anything outright, but asking questions that clearly carried weight. Could new forensic interpretation reshape the timeline? Are early assumptions now being reconsidered? They were not saying it directly, but everyone understood what they meant. Then came the reactions that made everything even more intense. Certain public figures started weighing in carefully, strategically, but noticeably. One industry insider posted a line that went instantly viral. Technology does not lie. People do. Millions of views, thousands of comments, endless argument. Was that aimed at someone? Or was it just a broad statement? No one knew. But that did not stop the debate. At the same time, supporters of the family were pushing back hard, calling out what they saw as exploitation. This is a real family, a real person, not some internet puzzle. Stop turning it into a conspiracy circus. But by then, it was too late. Because once the idea of a hidden timeline gets into public conversation, it becomes almost impossible to contain. Every old clip gets re-examined. Every past statement gets questioned. Every silence starts to feel suspicious. And the pressure started building all over again. Not just on investigators, but on everyone connected to the case. Because now the public was no longer asking only what happened. They were asking who knew more than they admitted. And that is a dangerous shift. Because once trust starts breaking, it is incredibly hard to rebuild. And just when it felt like the tension could not get any higher, one final detail started circulating. A detail that did not just add fuel to the fire, it threatened to burn down the entire narrative. Because if this next piece is real, then everything people think they know so far may only be the beginning. And just when everyone thought the chaos had peaked, the final twist landed. According to claims circulating from within investigative circles, a new detail surfaced quietly. And this one did not come from social media or random speculation. It allegedly came from a sealed internal review of the pacemaker data itself. And what it supposedly showed changed the direction of the case yet again. According to those leaked claims, there was a secondary anomaly timestamp buried deeper in the device logs. Something not included in the first round of interpretation. Something that only appeared after more advanced reanalysis. And this anomaly did not just show stress. It showed a sustained irregular pattern, not a single spike, not one isolated moment, a sequence, almost a progression, almost like events unfolding in real time. And this is where everything opens up, because that sequence allegedly lines up with a time window in which Nancy was officially described as unreachable. Not confirmed missing, not confirmed alone, just unreachable. And that distinction changes everything, because unreachable does not mean inactive. It only means no one had visibility. Now place that next to the pacemaker data, and a completely different picture starts to emerge, one in which Nancy may have been conscious longer than people believed, one in which interactions may have happened before the official timeline even really begins, and one in which someone else's presence may not have been accidental at all. But here is the part that sent online discussion into absolute panic. A second alleged leak suggested something even more disturbing, that the pacemaker may not have recorded only heart activity. It may have reflected response patterns consistent with external stimulation. In other words, reactions not caused solely by internal stress, but potentially triggered by something happening around her, something outside her body, something physical.
But we need to know where she is. We need her to come home.
And the second that theory hit the internet, everything exploded all over again. Are they saying someone was with her during that entire window? If that is true, does it destroy the official timeline completely? Is this now much bigger than a missing person case? But just as fast as those theories spread, the pushback intensified. Experts online began warning people that pacemaker data is highly complex, that it can be misread, that correlation is not proof, that this is exactly how misinformation grows. And now the case sits in a kind of contradiction. Two realities building at the same time. One side believes this is the breakthrough that exposes everything. The other believes it is a dangerous overreach built on misunderstood medical forensics. But the most unsettling part is this. No official body has publicly confirmed or denied the anomaly. Silence again. And that silence is what is making everything worse. Because in a case like this, silence rarely calms anything down. It feeds it. And now the biggest question is no longer only what happened to Nancy. It is this. Why does the data keep suggesting a story no one is officially acknowledging? And as investigators reportedly prepare yet another review of those pacemaker logs, one thing is becoming impossible to ignore. This case is not winding down. It is reopening deeper than before. And whatever comes next may force everyone to question what they believed from the very beginning. Before we end this video, I want you to really think about everything you just heard. Because this is no longer just another update in the case. Every time new information surfaces, every time investigators go back over the evidence, the story changes. And now the real question is not only what happened to Nancy Guthrie. The real question is why the evidence keeps pointing in directions that do not match the official version. I want you to comment right now and tell me what you honestly believe. Do you think the pacemaker data is the breakthrough that exposes everything and proves someone has been hiding the truth from day one? Or do you think people are reading too much into technical forensic data that may be more complicated than it seems? Because the internet is completely divided on this right now, and I want to know where you stand. And answer this too. If the data really suggests another person was present during those critical moments, who do you think it could have been? Do not just scroll past this because your opinion matters more than people realize in cases like this. Every comment adds to the discussion. Every theory opens another angle. And sometimes the public starts noticing patterns before anyone else does. And if even one part of this story shocked you, make sure you hit the like button so this video reaches more people following the case closely. Subscribe to the channel because this is not the last update. In fact, what comes next could be even bigger than this. There are still unanswered questions, still gaps no one has explained, still details that have not been fully revealed. And as more information comes out, I will keep breaking it down step by step without missing anything important. So, turn on notifications because the next update could change everything again. And before I go, I want to ask you one last thing. If you were leading this investigation right now, what would you focus on first? The pacemaker data or the people closest to Nancy? Let me know below. I will see you in the next one.